Hello and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host Greg Payne coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hello everybody. Welcome back to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. You are really going to enjoy learning about Frank Sinclair. A little bit of Frank's background is that he comes out of rural North Carolina. He joined the Air Force at 18, was quickly rising through the ranks, and then encountered some difficulty and challenges within the Air Force, and that followed him outside of the Air Force. Now, Frank has been able to overcome a lot of personal challenges and is now on a mission to install the same feelings of love and encouragement to others. Frank has gone on to get a theology degree from Nazarene Bible College and has created an educational foundation called Dream Again LLC. Frank encourages and works with business owners and individuals in the Colorado Springs and Colorado area, and was introduced to me through a mutual friend, James Devine. And I will put a link to my conversation with James in the show notes, as well as links to Frank's Facebook page, his Dream Again LLC website. You guys will be able to dive in after this conversation to learn even more about Frank, and then hopefully reach out and connect with Frank. Let him know how this conversation has impacted you. So you guys are going to enjoy this. Sit back, enjoy the conversation. Make sure that you check out the show notes that are on my website for links on how to connect with Frank, and then listen to the conversation that I also had with James. Hey, Frank, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me about your experience with being a grandpa. This is something I've definitely been looking forward to doing for a while.
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate being asked to be on a Cool Grandpa Podcast.
What I'd like to do is get started with your experience when you were learning that you were going to be a grandpa for the first time, and how that hit you, because a lot of us typically will have different reactions. Everybody has something different. Sometimes we're a little bit older in our journeys, and it's been a case of, boy, I didn't think this day would ever come. And then some of us are a little bit of, and this is me, was a little bit of, oh crap, I'm too young for this.
Yeah, mine was an oh crap moment as well. Not because I was too young, but my daughter was too young to be having a baby. So my first grandkid, who's a freshman in college now, came, and she was only 16 years old. So it was pretty tumultuous during that time, and I was not a happy camper finding out that she was pregnant.
Right. Well, and you know, that's part of what we're trying to do here is talk to people about all their different experiences, how things were happening. And so one of the items that I'd love to hear is, as you had that unexpected position of being a grandpa, is just how was some of the adjustment and how was some of the mindset around that? Because sometimes that could go very negative, and then sometimes you can definitely flip that and make it into a very much of a positive situation.
Well, just in total transparency, during the time of the pregnancy, there was a lot of negative involved there, and I'll be, to my shame, I caused a lot of that because I really had a hard time embracing that. So young girls pregnant consistently as I was coming up myself, and it was not a really good feeling knowing that your own kid, and blaming yourself and what didn't I do, what did I do wrong, and how did I push her away, how did I push her into some other guy's arms, etc. All of these things that went on. But when the baby came, it all flipped.
Now, what was some of the things that you guys were doing to help out during that time? Because I've talked with some people where the grandparents immediately stepped into being the full-time babysitter role while, the daughter or son were finishing school or were trying to get work going. What was some of your, action items, let's say, at the time?
Well, I sort of stepped into Makai's life as his father, because his biological father was not really heavily involved. And he and I never had a really good relationship anyway. So I stepped into that. We did a lot of babysitting during that time, and helping Danielle with the care and the raising of that baby.
Do you think that also helped you have a closer relationship with the grandchildren, stepping into that role, not just with Makai, but the others as well?
Oh, absolutely. It really, I think it prepped me to be more compassionate, get more excited about the future grandbabies and all of those things. That was the traumatic one, and that was difficult, but it really helped me to. I wasn't very happy about the role of having to be a father figure again when I had kids still at home. But at the same time, I think it drew Danielle and I closer together too, because she saw how easily her mom and I, how our hearts had softened when Makai came, and how we really stepped into the role of support for her.
I think I've, have discussed with some other people where the grandfather really stepped into a father figure role, that it was rewarding for that grandchild in the sense that there was a little bit of more of an age gap between the parent and child, with having that age gap between the grandchild and the grandfather. And some of that was too, is that there was still an innate part where the grandchild wanted to please the grandfather maybe a little bit more, and worked on self-discipline even a little bit more than if it had been a parent where they're day in, day out in that family unit. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's probably accurate. I don't know if I had enough time with him to see the outcome of that, but he's been incredibly disciplined throughout of his life. He's at one of the top engineering schools in America now, and I'm certainly not going to take credit for that, because I can't even spell engineering. We only had 2 years together, and then Danielle, we still supported her, but she moved into an apartment that was supported by one of the young ladies, by a grant from one of the young ladies that was killed in 9/11. And because of her academics and were so good, and she did so well in school, she won that grant and that scholarship, and had the finances to go out on her own and really delve headfirst into her studies in college.
Wow, that's fantastic, because, having that situation land on you at such a young age, there's so many different directions that young women and young people can go through at that point, with a lot of them being negative. It's a real testament, I think, to probably your input into her as far as the direction that she took off to. I mean, there's definitely some that's hers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's definitely some of that comes from the parents at that point. And then also, too, not making that early pregnancy a super negative, because I think if grandparents go negative in that situation and kind of, let's say, write off the daughter, write off the grandchildren, boy, can that spiral into a negative situation very quickly. And
yes, it can. And I'm happy to report that by age 26, she was a CFO at Denver Health in Denver, Colorado, vice president at Comcast, and is now the CFO at the Colorado Trust, and has a separate company that she owns herself. She's one of the more celebrated executives in Colorado.
Wow, that is fantastic. Now, how about when some of the other grandchildren started coming along? How did the relationships with those grandchildren develop?
Well, my youngest daughter, we sort of went through this. My youngest daughter, and all of these things sound tragic, but they really were the forming of who they became as people. Brianna had a baby her senior year of high school and became a meth addict. Yeah, so that was the next grandbaby that was dialed up. I think we learned something from our reactions to the first one. We certainly didn't react the same way. But Brianna kind of had ran away from home and started doing drugs and etc. So initially, we had very little contact with little Keenan, and then she got so strung out on the drugs that my wife and I took Keenan for several years from her because we were afraid for his welfare, and raised him for a couple of years as well. And I love to say I was the happiest guy on earth to do that. I vacillated between resentment and joy and those things. But Michelle, I think, was really the bedrock of holding that situation together.
Well, and I'm glad that you talked about that, the different range of emotions, because I think one of the things that we hear about with similar situations is when they come out positive, it sounds like it was always positive.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. That's, going through these experiences, grandfathers, grandmothers, mothers, grandchildren, there's a whole range of, there's days, weeks, months where it's like, I hate this situation. I hate what's going on. I hate the relationship. But then there's those golden moments when the glue and the tenacity of that relationship holds it together long enough for the positivity and that growth to really come out.
Indeed. You said that extremely well, Greg. That's exactly what happened in this case. And Brianna, who really, I don't know if I should say this out loud on film or to be held against me later, but she was only one that was always the closest to Dad, still is. she still, I mean, it's just those kind of relationships, you can't really understand them, and I've stopped. It's caused some angst for Danielle, the other daughter, because of how close we are at times as well, and I can understand her feeling that way. But yeah, Keenan is 16 years old now, right, Michelle?
Gonna be
16 in October. September. He's a yeah. You can hear the corrections. You're married, right?
Yes,
Rick?
yes.
Yeah. You get that. So yeah. So he's a sophomore in high school now, and I'm happy to report that Brianna is to our knowledge, the youngest female CEO of a major trades company in America.
What do you think the secret has been with both of these daughters really excelling through difficult and challenging circumstances, each one being different? But what do you think some of this has been that pushed them or motivated them to not just survive, but eventually start to thrive in a professional sense, and then it also sounds like in the relationship sense?
Well, there was incredible challenges, Greg, to be honest, that they had to observe coming up. Their mom and I are divorced. We were married 20 years, and it was always tumultuous, our relationship. So having to observe that and deal with the chaos that caused in our family as well. I think some is genetics because all of us are business. All of us have business degrees. Their mom too, who's an entrepreneur, as well as I am. So some of that flows, and they've seen the tenacity that we have. So being modeled, even if we weren't as successful as they are, but doing that, and it really built a strong, a really inner strength in them to maximize their talents. We've always told them that we're not raising them for the way that we want them to be. We're raising them for the way that they were designed to be. And I think that's a big difference in life. And we saw their designs early, and we really, really encouraged that along the way. And we've shown a lot of pride in who they are and what they've become every step of the way.
Wow. Wow. And that was, I thought, really important too, is that phrasing of raising them as they were designed to be, not how we want them to be.
Yes.
Because so many times I think we hear the stories of people going into the family business or following fathers or mothers into law or medicine or roofing or whatever it might be, and that's not where that person's aptitude or passions are. And so that's incredible, and something that even grandparents can keep an eye out for, what their sons and daughters and their grandchildren, because I think sometimes we can speak into our children when we see maybe that they're pushing the grandchildren towards where the children want them to go. Mm-hmm. And just being able to pull back a little bit and say, hey, Junior, Robert or whomever the grandchildren might be is like, they're really probably more bent on something else. Or have you even checked in with them about what they want?
Right. And because I believe wholeheartedly in giftedness, and I believe that every human being has a design, and most go through their entire lives without realizing what that is. And it's really sad because parents take their cues from culture rather than taking their cues from the giftedness of their child and seeing their natural bents along the way. For instance, Randy, my son, used to buy candy and take it to school and resell it. It was a natural entrepreneurial bent that he had, and you could see working for other people was not in the cards for him. So he has done incredible work with finding his true passion in life, what he was designed to do, and he's in the midst of that. He set the standard for success among the kids. So, and he does incredibly well.
Wow. Now, as the grandkids have been getting older, have you been able to step in and counsel them and guide them a little bit towards what maybe they're designed to do? Because I'm certainly during our teenage years, sometimes we don't know, and sometimes we start to follow a big, bright, shiny object. That's not really how we're designed. But as a grandfather, did you happen to be able to counsel the grandkids on following their design?
I haven't done a whole lot of that. A lot of them are really young, so it's really hard to pivot them. But the older one, here is my stance on that. I trust my children to uncover the same thing in their kids that we help to uncover in them. And I really ask for permission, and I think this is very important, to speak certain things into my grandkids' lives, because I don't want to ever be misconstrued that I am stepping and interfering, and because that's the growth. And I believe my kids are going to do a great job if they ask me, or when I have the opportunity to have kids over here and things, I talk to them about who they are, inherently, who do they think they are, and what do they see themselves becoming. because they have great examples ahead of them of parents that have hit the lowest lows,
Right.
and have risen to the highest heights.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, that you mentioned, is getting that permission to be working with the grandchildren and stepping into that counselor role, so that you're on board with what the parents are trying to do, and so that the kids aren't hearing mixed signals or
Yes.
or something else. So that's
Or the parents don't think that that's signaling some kind of deficit in them.
oh
You know.
yeah, good point, because
Yeah.
it a good intention could be easily misconstrued as saying, oh well, my dad doesn't think I'm good enough,
Yeah.
or my father-in-law doesn't think I'm good enough.
Yeah.
However that is, and that's not necessarily the intent. The intent is more of a that mentor role and that guide role. But to your point, if you're asking permission, then the lines of communication are very clear.
Right. Yeah. And I don't want those to ever be blurred.
No, that's a good point. Now, as the kids were, I'm going to step back a little bit. So as the grandkids were younger, when they were coming over and spending time with you, tell me a little bit about how those days were.
Yeah. Once again, I'm a little hesitant because I know this could be used against me. We have a tradition here. My wife isn't always the happiest with me about this, but we call visits at grandma and Nana yes day.
Okay.
Because when they come here, no is taken off the table. What do we want to do? What you want to stay up, watch movies all night, just make sure that you don't interrupt me.
Right.
If you want.
Let grandpa go to sleep.
Yeah, let grandpa go to sleep. But it is. I think part of that is exacting some revenge on my children. But I think my role is a fun role. This is a time where I get to have fun with these children and just lavish them with love and attention and those things. And some people call that spoiling, but whatever. That's really how I see my role now, is to just affirm, encourage, and lift up, and throw in a few mentoring things in just for good measure.
Sure. And one thing, just to make you feel better, is I talked with a couple of brothers about their grandfather's experience. And their grandfather on occasion said yes to root beer floats at 9:30 in the morning. So, you're in good company as far as grandpas and that's having that yes. So
Hey, yeah. I would say yes to a root beer float at 9:00 in the morning.
now, as you've started going through your own coaching experience in your practice with the encouragement, how did you find that role of encourager being with the grandchildren? Because it had to have become very much a deliberate mindset and a deliberate practice with you.
Encouragement for me is very natural. I mean, it really is. I really can't take a lot of credit for it, Greg, to be honest with you. It was my design. It really was. When I see a person, and this is anywhere I go in life, and Michelle will tell you this is true, I know no strangers, and I can say, you know what? I just want to tell you that you're incredible, that you're awesome, that you're an amazing human being. And I can say it in such a way it doesn't sound like flattery, because I mean it in my heart. That's the case, and that's the language for my grandchildren. I want them to know how incredible they are, how amazingly they were made, how they have so much to offer the world, and then how serving is really the place of living. If you serve well, you live well.
Right.
And it's not about you. It's about making heroes of the people that you engage. So all my grandkids are heroes to me. And I want them to know that. I really, really do.
Wow, that's awesome. How now, as some of the grandkids are older, have they been able to appreciate the kind of relationship that you've had with them, and they've been able to give you any of that feedback?
They all act that way.
Okay.
So if it's different, then they're really good actors. But yeah.
Well, and what I was getting at is that sometimes grandparents don't know how big of an impact they've had on grandkids' lives until after the grandparents have departed. Mm-hmm. And, that's one of the things I'm finding with some of these interviews is that it's uncovering where people that are in their 50s and 60s thinking about their grandparents suddenly realize, like, wow, I didn't, it hits them during the interview that my grandparents had a much bigger impact on my life than I ever thought. And I've had experiences where people have said, oh, I made sure that they knew it once, but it has to be in your later teens and 20s when it starts to happen. So that was where I was asking if the grandkids have ever pulled you aside and say, hey, Grandpa, I really have appreciated what you poured into me.
No.
Well, once they hear this, I'm sure the cards and the phone calls and the emails and things will start coming. Maybe a steak dinner or two.
Well, let's bring it on then, Greg. Let's have 2 interviews.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's something about teens and when they get to the age where appreciation is even recognized, mm-hmm. that it seems to be the hardest thing to draw out of teenagers. So, I mean, for them to voice it, their actions sometimes show that, but to actually voice that.
Well, and I think that's totally natural because I know for me and my wife as young parents, by the time we started the kids were younger and things, it clicked with like, ooh, not only were my folks trying to do the best they could, but they actually did so much more for me than I ever appreciated at the time. And so I think it does take that little bit of aging and that little bit of maturity. And I think it's natural that, children, it's all about them and for a period of time, and if we do our jobs right, then eventually it flips and it starts to become all about other people.
Yeah. So, the most natural thing of human nature is selfishness. Even at my age now, I have to admit that ugly part of me still rises. I'm sure it's true for you.
Oh, sure.
It's just simply what humans do. It takes a lot of intentionality to make other people and to recognize that the service of other people is really what causes you to rise. We rise by lifting others. I believe that with all of my heart. So I've seen that in my grown children. They are very intentional about lifting other people. And I know that my grandkids are having that model to them as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and especially when it's not only their parents modeling that for them, but it's also their grandparents are modeling that for them.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be exciting to see how the grandkids grow and mature and their business ventures and just how that attitude of serving others and looking outside themselves manifests.
Yes. I'm excited about that. I am. Hope I stay around long enough to see some of that unfold.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the big things with grandparents is wanting to be around long enough to see that next generation come through and see how they move forward and how they progress with their design.
Indeed.
How has the relationship changed with the grandkids as they've gotten older and they've become teenagers and the sleepovers and some of those things that you do when they're younger changed to when they're now young adults and they're starting to get concepts and they're starting to look out into the world. How has that relationship changed?
Well, they're more resistant to, the lovey-dovey stuff, and more resistant to just hanging out and stuff because they have friends now. Those things are much more important than grandpa or mom or dad or any of those things. So, that's just a natural cycle of life. I think Michelle and I and their parents, we recognize those cycles because I've seen it so many times now. And not only my own kids, but now as I look at my grandchildren, it's just a natural cycle of life. It's not personal. It really isn't. And I think some grandparents take it personally that their kids are just experiencing life. And if we look back on our own lives, even that many years ago for me, the same thing happened. My friends became much more important than my parents and grandparents were during that time when we were being socialized and life. So really, I recognize the cycle of life. I'm okay with that because we continue to seem to have little ones all the time. So we can, we can lavish all our attention on the little ones. And matter of fact, my latest grandson's only 3 weeks old.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Number 12.
So, yeah, and you've got them spread all throughout. You've got them in college and you've got them just out of the hospital.
Yep. And everything in between, so yeah. I'm so blessed, man. I just see people that they're my age and they're still trying to talk their kids into having kids and right. I don't have any grandkids, or I had one and my other 2 kids, they're probably not going to have children, and etc. It feels so wrong to me, and I'm joking mostly. Because I said, I only had my kids to have kids. That was the point.
Right. Well, what's that old saying? If I knew grandkids were so much fun, I would have had them first.
Exactly. Would have skipped the kids altogether. Michelle just raised her hand and said she did. Yeah, because she's never had a kid. My wife, Michelle, now. Yeah. So she came in as an instant grandma. This is our 15th year of marriage this year.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you hit on something that I thought was pretty important again, and that is that recognizing that their relationship with the grandkids are going to change as they change, and not fighting it. The granddaughter's not always going to be grandpa's little princess. At some point she's going to be a teenager. She's going to be standoffish. She's going to be more into her friends. But it's those younger years of having those yes days and having the sleepovers that plant the seeds that are going to maintain that relationship through those teenage years and through those years where they don't want to have a lot to do with you, or let's say maybe not as much.
No, you phrased it right the first time.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I think every relationship is going to be different. And so that degree of separation and that degree is going to be different. But I think, too, is that relationship change has to deal with how the grandfather and the grandparents view those grandchildren as they grow. To your point, if you don't give them that space and you don't recognize that, okay, every Thursday is not going to be pizza night. They're going to have recitals. They're going to have sports. They're going to have things to do. If we don't allow those grandchildren to grow, then there's going to be more and more pushback.
And, we internalize stuff. And grandkids, if it always is about you and your feeling, because they're already incredibly selfish at this point. It's all about them, right?
Right.
And then if you mirror that back to them, they're going to internalize that there's something wrong with them during that phase of their lives. All my friends do this, why is it a problem in my family? Why does my granddad feel like I have to still act like I did when I was 7 or 8 or 9 or 10? Now I'm big. This is what we do. So it's not personal. And I think if people remember that with your kids, your grandkids, it's not personal. It's what's happening with them.
Well, and I think to your point, it's a natural part of that aging process, right? That we were talking about is
Yes.
that as they start to become into those tween years, it's more about them and it's more about their social acceptance and it's more about their friends and it's more about things because they're trying to figure out who they are.
Absolutely.
And that's a tough journey. And I think, and I don't know what your views are, but I think during those years, the time with grandparents becomes much more about quality versus quantity.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely on the head, Greg.
I think that we have that opportunity to step into that mentor role, as you were talking about, in that encouragement role, because a little half-hour visit with grandpa that's all about positivity and encouragement can do much more for them than a 3-hour pizza night.
And not talking to one another, acknowledging, just feeding your face, et cetera. And that's what it's about. Well, we spent time, but you're right. Those moments in time that are so valuable that you have with your babies, and I call them all my babies. So that you have with your babies is just so critical. And I have to say I'm a little bit proud of myself because I didn't experience that myself.
Well, and that's an interesting point too, is that there's a number of us and grandfathers out there that never had that relationship. And so to your point, I think there's a large number of men that are just trying to figure this role out because there's not an instruction manual.
No, there is not. And when you think there is, then that's why I'm not judgmental of any way that people raise their kids, short of abuse, of course,
Sure.
but raise your babies. That's there's a lot of maturing going on in that space, and when you're doing that, you're maturing, they're maturing, we're all maturing in the roles that we have at that specific time. I'll probably never reach the place where I say I'm totally satisfied with my grandparenting or my parenting, et cetera. Just continue to evolve and grow in those roles and do the very best that I can.
Now, Frank, what kind of advice would you have for grandfathers that maybe are new grandfathers? And we've certainly talked a lot, but are there some key elements or some key pieces of advice you'd have for new grandfathers?
I mean, just enjoy the ride. Don't be critical of your kids around your grandkids. Don't criticize their parenting. Don't try to take over roles. Relax. This is your time as a grandparent. This is your time to relax and just be present and all in with these babies and just love them. I mean, how can you not? Really, I don't understand that. That's something I'm missing. How could you not love these bundles of joy, brand new bundles of joy that have just come out and stuff? Just demonstrate that. Be vulnerable, be transparent about your joy, about your love, those things that we used to call soft skills in business, right? They're the most incredible skills that you can have is loving your kids around your grandkids, letting them know how much you love their parents, and then just enjoying the wonder and incredibleness that goes along with being a grandparent. Don't overthink it. Don't get into the paralysis of analysis. Just enjoy it and flow with that, and you'll do fine.
No, that's great advice. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Now, if people wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, what are some of the best ways that they can do that?
Well, my business is called Dream Again Business Consulting. You can go to dreamagainllc.com is my website. There's a calendar there. If there's open spaces you can fill in, and we can Zoom and talk about these things, or have a business that you're struggling with and just want an initial free consultation. you can do that there as well.
That's fantastic. And I hope people take advantage of your offer and the generosity of getting on and having a call with you, especially if they're thinking about starting up a business or they're starting a business, because I know you're pretty impactful in that Colorado Springs area.
I do my best. And I think whenever a person finds what their design, and I go back to that word because it's incredibly important to me. If you discovered a design for you in life, then you know, failure, that's not what you think about. You think about, how can I get up in the morning and how many more people can I reach, and how can I pour myself into helping people. 80% failure in entrepreneurship is not acceptable. It really isn't. And we need to help new businesses thrive. And we do that by helping people get out of their own way.
Like I said, I hope people take advantage of this and reach out to you. And we'll be sure to put the links to your website and everything else into the show notes so people can check it there as well. So Frank, thank you so much for spending this time with us and talking about your experience with being a grandfather. This has been very impactful, and have enjoyed this conversation.
Greg, thank you for doing this. Who thought of this? You know what I mean? Who would have thought of this? This is absolutely amazing. And there's a human being on earth that thinks about grandparenting, because a lot of it gets lost and is not celebrated or appreciated in culture. So thank you, my friend, for thinking of this and making this a platform that other people can grow from.
Oh, thank you so much. And that's awesome coming from you. So have a good night.
You as well.
Wow, what an encouraging story this was. And I'm so grateful to Frank that he took the time to sit down with me, talk about his experience with being a grandfather. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had on this conversation was not just the idea of loving the grandchildren, encouraging them, being that mentor role that they need, but also that idea that you need to show love and respect to their parents, your children, that it's important that the grandchildren see how you respect their parents' boundaries and how much you respect and love them, so that behavior gets modeled and then reinforced. So hopefully there is a positive child-parent relationship that you leave behind when you go home or when the grandchildren go home. So that was really an inspiring and powerful message that I took away. So remember, go to my website, that is cool-grandpa.us, and look for the links that I'll put in on that website for Frank and how you can connect with him, learn more about his Dream Again LLC and all of the fantastic work and encouragement that Frank pours into his community and pours into his relationships. In the meantime, I want you guys to remember to be awesome and to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.